Thank you everybody for joining us today for our special edition of the Virtual Pub co-organized by Euro-BioImaging and the Euro-BioImaging Industry Board. We have 7 talks today presenting a wide range of different open hardware initiatives across all different scales and methods. So we're really excited for this session today. And in this event, we'll highlight really a cross-scales approach on open hardware, and we'll cover talks from open hardware initiatives in human imaging through light sheet systems for tissue samples, down to the super resolution scale. And we'll have talks from both the software as well as the hardware side, including machine learning and microscope control and different microscope detector systems. And I think the diversity of the talks here will really highlight just how active and diverse this community of open hardware development and imaging is, and how many different initiatives are being pursued across the different fields. And I think with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who is Ruben Pellicer-Guridi from San Sebastián, who is representing here the Open Source Imaging Initiative and who are presenting their work to democratize access to human MRI system. Ruben, if you want to share your screen and start your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, and thank you for putting together this meeting. It's a great opportunity for us to show this work and to learn of other works. In this case, I'm pleased to talk in behalf of this community. It's called Open Source Imaging Community, that it's specific for MRI, in this case, MRI and NMR. And the first slide, we wanted to introduce what is the motivation for this community to feel that it's needed, the community. And the thing is that MRI, it is a gold standard. It's very useful for many human clinical applications because it is non-invasive. You don't need to cut open the patient to look inside. It doesn't harm the patient. And it gives a lot of options for contrasts. For example, you can see cartilage on a knee injury. It is not that easy to see with other imaging technologies. And at the end, if they don't see it with any other technology, they end up referring you to an MRI to see it. But beside that imaging modality, you also know probably the spines, injuries, like hernias, also tumors for the brain, for different parts of the body. But there are more exotic applications for MRI that often are not used because the machine is booked, fully booked. They are very expensive. For example, we have cardiac or blood vessel imaging, and we have also diffusion tensor imaging that informs of the connectivity of the brain for scientific purposes, and also for diseases. And beside that, there is the big brother of MRI, that it is the NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, that it is incredibly informative, and more exotic imaging like functional images of dynamic movements of tissues and thoughts in the brain. What is the problem? The problem is, although this technology is proven to be very useful and it can help in a lot of early diagnosis of diseases, instead of being able to cover all the possibilities it can do, only a fraction of them are available to patients. And this is visualized in this plot, where they show how many MRIs are per person. And you can imagine that there are many countries that they don't have access at all to MRI, or very few, only in the main cities and in the main hospitals. Even in the wealthy, let's say, wealthy countries, they have a scarcity of MRIs, as you can see in this sentence that the president of the International Society for Magnetic Resonance in Medicine said, that we have to watch out what we use MRI for, because it's expensive. And what can we do to make it more affordable? We can see then a comparison of the cars and the transportation methods. No, we have very high-end cars that they can do unbelievable record-breaking times and performance. We have the equivalent in MRI world, but in that world of MRI, it's missing the equivalent of the bicycle. And the bicycle is actually what covers most, or a big part, not most, but a big part of the transportation needs of humans, because many humans can afford a bicycle. And is there a way to find the equivalent of a bicycle in the MRI world? In this case, we can try to find the equivalent, decreasing the speed, like in the cars, no? And for that, we tend to go to the low field. Why the low field? The low field basically means when we are creating an image of a patient, what we do is we insert the patient in a high magnetic field, 1 Tesla, 3 Teslas, and this slightly polarizes the nuclei that we are going to observe, generally hydrogen. But this external magnetic field, this 1 Tesla field, is very difficult to achieve. It's a very high field, and generally it's made with superconducting wires, and which they need to work with liquid helium. They need to work under cryogenia. So the systems they are worth several millions of euros. Not only that, the space that they are in, it's also very expensive. Also because they are very heavy, they need very special housing requirements. So low field can be much cheaper because the magnetic field that you have to generate doesn't need to be with superconducting wires, could be made with permanent magnets, for example. It's smaller. You can make purpose-made machines for extremities, for example. We will see an example later. And it's also safer because that's such a strong magnetic field, and the RF pulses, radio frequency pulses we employ, they can heat up metals, for example, and they have some safety limits that they reach and limit the pulses we apply. And in this case, in the low field, those safety limits are way more relaxed. So a portable MRI will be feasible. I don't know if you have been unfortunate of seeing how X-rays can be rolled into patients' rooms to help patients without moving them around. We hope that one day it will be possible with MRIs. And here you have some images visualizing that decreasing the magnetic field indeed decreases the resolution, but doesn't need necessarily to be with a loss of information, meaning the diagnosis can be accurate still. And surprisingly, also new doors to contrast are open. So sometimes you can even get a higher contrast in between tissues, which is the way for a diagnosis. The challenge is when we decrease the field, we decrease the signal quality, the signal to noise ratio. This is more or less a plot. You see it's in logarithmic scale, so it goes down rapidly. So we need to be very careful when we design these systems, but we thought it was possible, and we are seeing now that after a few years of working on it, that it is possible to make systems that are much more affordable, that still give clinical value. How low is low field? Because we decrease the external magnetic field, we decrease the signal quality. If we go too low, it's going to be much harder and much more expensive. It becomes also more expensive to sense on those fields, because you need a special protection around the patient, because the ambient noise also increases. So more or less, so you get an idea, is in between 10 milliteslas, 0.5 teslas. We will see some examples that work in this field strengths. For example, two images of 50 and 70 milliteslas will be shown later. What is open source imaging? So this is the reason I explained the motivation. And open source imaging is a community that started willing to bring together all this knowledge of people in the MRI world. Generally, originally, it was moving in between scientists working in this area. And now we have basically two main objectives. One is to be a platform for visualizing the works on open source works on MRI world, and also it is tries to bring in some collaborations to make something happen, a final product, to not only to become a place for people to place their works individually, but also to try to bring them together. And then there are, let's say, 6 paths that open source an MRI machine can be used for many applications. For example, education. So if we can make more affordable systems, it can be also used for training and for universities to show mathematics for image reconstruction, biology for sample analysis, medical imaging, engineering, radio frequency, digital control, a lot of opportunities. But it's also a place to create a new possibility for businesses, hopefully through a different modality, where it's not limited to major countries that they create a kind of a monopoly of MRI, but also smaller companies could be created that they provide services. And the community, it started in 2016 in a conference, probably the biggest conference in our modality. And then we started offering a platform for visualizing different works, that it is called opensourceimaging.org. And you have here a screenshot of the different works made open source. We saw that a lot of projects are software, and software is fantastic. We really need it, but we were lacking hardware, a lot of hardware. So a big part of the effort has been bringing together experts and getting them involved in the hardware building and sharing. And for example, here I wanted to show you one of the projects that has brought together. Here I'm showing 4 different groups, but it actually 4 or 5 different groups, but it is actually wider. And it is through a modular developments that can be reused. In this case, in the center of the image, you have a control platform that is basically the brain of the MRI that very precisely controls the time of different pulses. Like in an MRI, we need radio frequency pulses. We need to distort the external magnetic field to know in space where the signal comes from. That is called with gradient. So there is a platform that offers already this hardware that it is very time consuming to produce. And finally, we can focus on developing, for example, magnets, and take advantage of all these effort that is has been shared, and now we have a very high-end product. And here you have groups from the MIT, for example, or the Dortmund University that they made educational systems, tabletop systems, and also you have human systems. You can see here on the upper this side, upper right side. They are an equivalent system that they are for human extremity imaging. And here I wanted to show you that it's not only limiting to MRI, this system. This is my work in particular. No, I don't work in MRI, in specific human MRI. I work with nitrogen vacancy centers for sensing and imaging. And I'm repurposing this control platform because it gives me what I need to control my experiments and my magnetic fields. And with this, I wanted just to show you some results to show you how for students, it can be very motivating to see that their reconstruction algorithms, for example, they bring you somewhere. And for clinicians, that we are getting there with image quality. And with this, if you know a bit of MRI or radio frequency or something related, there are different branches. Anyone is very welcome to join. And I would like to thank you for your attention.